All right, so we're now live. Are you hear me? All right, so we're now live. Are you hear me? All right, so we're now live.
Good afternoon and welcome to everyone.
All right.
Morning is
Scott.
Biology Marathon. Oh, and Happy New Year to
Good
everyone.
afternoon and welcome to everyone.
All right. Scott.
Biology Marathon. Oh, and Happy New Year. Good afternoon.
Everyone, so I'm going to start now. You guys able to see my screen? Kishan, I'm speaking. Are you able to hear me now? Okay, okay, awesome. All right, so let's begin. So let me zoom this up a little bit so that everybody can see. So figure 5 below shows the profile of a freshwater pond and its immediate surroundings. Identify two biotic and two abiotic factors illustrated in the diagram. So by looking at the diagram, can we identify two abiotic and two biotic factors? So students at the diagram and identify two abiotic and two biotic factors. We can type it in the chat. So Kishore said biotic plant and water lily. That's correct. What is B and C? The reader? Me, I'm the reader. I don't know what is B and C, so be more specific. What is B and C? Come on, students, give me two abiotic factors, water and mud. That is correct. So the mud and the water would definitely be two of the abiotic factors. The picture is blurry. All right, I'm going to zoom it up some more. Look at it now. Is it any better? All right. So for biotic factors, we have water lily and we have fish. And for abiotic factors, water and the soil or the mud. All right, moving along to the next question. Suggest two ways in which any of the abiotic and biotic factors interact. So the question suggests two ways in which any of the biotic and abiotic factors interact. So in order to answer this question, we need to revisit what we wrote earlier. So earlier we wrote about the biotic factors such as water lily and fish or tadpole. And we also wrote about abiotic factors such as mud and water. What the question simple wants for you to do is to basically suggest how the biotic and the abiotic factors interact with each other. Want to give me at least. All right, so I get one. The water provide a habitat for the water lily to live. Very good. So that is 1 point. So the water provides a habitat for the water lily to live. Any other way in which the biotic and the abiotic factors interact? One more. The mud provides nutrients for the plant. Very good, very good. So those are the two ways in which the abiotic factors and the biotic factors within the small area interact with each other. So one, the water provides a habitat for the plants and other organisms such as fishes that are living within the water. And the mud provides nutrients to the plant within the water. And also you have small microorganisms or small organisms that live within the mud, and it is also considered to be a habitat for those small types of microorganisms. You know which paper, this is a mixture of different papers. So it's different questions from January 2005 to about 2009. So it's not one complete paper, it's a mixture of different questions. The soil allows for a plant growth. It provides the nutrients. All right, very good. Moving on to the next question. A new housing settlement is erected near the pond. Subject 4 precautions residents must take to preserve the pond as a natural habitat. A new housing settlement is erected near the pond. Suggest 4 precautions residents must take to preserve the pond as a natural habitat. Remember that precautions are put in place to prevent damages. So what kind of precautions could the residents, the community put in place, to preserve the pond as a natural habitat? So dispose of waste materials properly. By being properly, Lane, what do you mean? Because I know everybody know what proper means. So suppose they say dispose of waste materials properly, and me believe we must go throw it over in the pond. That could be a proper way for me. What do you mean by disposing of waste properly? Putting fencing around the pond, very good. So that is also one. So what we're coming up with, basically, we're also coming with solutions. So if it is Lane, you're going to say dispose of waste materials properly. What you can say is that the residents, the community need to put in this a lot of garbage bins, so that they can also make necessary calls so that the garbage trucks can visit regularly to obtain proper garbage disposal. Ensure plant fertilizers not enter the pond water as it can harm the wildlife. Protect the area by placing rule to not go anywhere near the pond. Very, very good. Very good. Say, the residents of the community, they can come up with the preservation of the pond residentially projects. So they can come up with community development projects for persons to volunteer and clean up garbage in and around the pond. Because you have many times where persons come up with like beach cleanup programs, you know, that persons volunteer and they clean up the area. Persons in the community can also do this type work to maintain cleaning up within that area. All right. So if we are finished with that question, anything else that we'd like to add? So dispose of is far away from the pond. All right. Okay, moving to the next question. After a period of every showers, an algal bloom appears in the pond. Suggest a reason for this increase in the population of algae in pond. So after a period of showers, an algal bloom appears in the pond. Suggest reason for this increase in the population of algae in the pond. Say about this question. All right. So chemicals like excess nitrogen and phosphorus can cause algal bloom. All right. Excess nutrients from the fertilizers cause the algal to grow or algae to grow. The heavy showers may have affected the wildlife that will eat the algae. May have been affected because there to be a break in food chain. That's a little bit unsure. I'm not certain about that one. I think Janine, you to reword it. So the problem with your answer is Janine, sorry, reword it. Sudden excess of nutrients from fertilizer or compost. All right, so it is simple leaching. If we know what is leaching, so after a heavy rainfall, leaching will cause the runoff coming from topsoil, such as chemicals such as nitrates, phosphorus, sodium, and all of that, to infiltrate water and cause eutrophication. So yeah, it is simple as that. So we are all not the correct path. All right. Moving over to the next question, explain what possible consequence of the rapid increase in algae population. So if it is that you have an overcasting of algae in the water body, what will happen to the organisms within the water? Students, what happens to organisms within the water due to the rapid increase of algae production? So increase in algae population can prevent organisms that need sunlight to carry out photosynthesis and get energy to not carry out properly or to an required extent. All right, awesome. So like organisms like plants that require some form of light to carry out photosynthesis, the light will be blocked because remember there is an overcast of algae production in the water. So the amount of light that normally enters the water, it will be reduced. So you know that certain organisms will not be able to carry out photosynthesis efficiently as possible. Miss, can you edit the document as we speak? Not in I wish I could, but can't. See, because I'm trying to zoom it at all times so that you guys can get. So that's the reason why I can't edit it at the moment. But just get a little notebook, man, Sydney. Just get a little notebook, and whatever you're not familiarized with, you can write it down. But like questions like this, I think that you guys are good with questions like these. All right, so that is just one reason, and that reason goes for plants and for animals now, like fishes, right? You have some fishes that need to come to the top in order to get oxygen. Due to the amount of algae in the water, they will not be able to come to the top. Some of the organisms will not be able to come to the top, and you know what will happen? They're going to suffocate and they're going to die. So what happens when you have too much algae production in the water? And the next one can also be because algae produces a lot of toxin that can affect the organisms with the water, because these toxins can be very poisonous. So we're going 3 reasons. So one, the plants, they will not be able to get enough sunlight to photosynthesize. 2, certain organisms, certain fish will not be able to come to the top to get enough oxygen to carry out respiration. So you know that they are going to die because they will not be able to produce enough energy within the body. And 3, the algae can produce a lot of toxin, and the toxin can be very poisonous to the organisms within the water. So we're finished with this question. We're moving on to the next question. Let me get this zoomed out a little bit so that we can see the web properly. All right, now we're moving into the next question. Yes, with the that is indeed correct. All right, moving into the next question. We're now looking at 2 food webs to be exact. we're looking at an aquatic food web and a terrestrial food web. So these are the food webs that we are looking at. Okay, I'm going to try and use the phone for audio. Hopefully it will work. So let me try.
Is it any better now, students? Is it any better now? You can type in the chat and let me know. All right, so I'm going to work with the phone for audio. Okay. All right, so are we able to see the different types of food web? No comment? All right, so I'm going to take that as a yes. So, all right, so what we're going to do now, so the figure above requires us to fill out a table, right? What the table wants for us to do, first thing first, we have different columns in the table. So we have trophic levels, aquatic food web, and we have terrestrial food web. So for the first area of the table, it's blank. For the trophic level, all right, awesome. So we have trophic level here, and we have the aquatic food web. So from the aquatic food web, we have a pondweed. From the terrestrial food web, we have plant materials, leaves, fruits, and seeds. So for this trophic level here, that is blank, what should we put here? All right, so that section would be for the producer, not primary producer, just producer. So right here, we're going to have producer. So I'm going to try and edit now. Hopefully it works out. For the persons who wants for me to edit. So let me put producer right here. All right. For the next area now. So we're moving down to the next trophic level, right? So we have primary consumer here for the aquatic food web. We don't have any primary consumer. And for the terrestrial food web, we don't have any primary consumer as well. Let's go back to the food webs to pick out primary consumers. So what kind of primary consumers can we get from the aquatic food web and from the terrestrial food web? Students, what kind of primary producers can we get from the aquatic food web and from the terrestrial food web? So tadpole and iguana for the aquatic food web. So we can come down here in the aquatic food web and put tadpole and iguana. And for the terrestrial food web, For the terrestrial food web, we're looking at terrestrial food web. What are the primary consumers in the terrestrial food web? So let me go back. Oh, I made a mistake. So I'm gonna put the two of them one time. Oh my bad. So let me remove the iguana. So tadpole for aquatic and iguana for terrestrial. All right. Okay, now we're moving down to the third trophic level. Yes, Karima, I made the adjustment. All right, now we're moving over to the third trophic level. So here we have produced a primary consumer. What would come next after the primary consumer? So what should come here? Secondary consumer. Very good. So the secondary consumer should come after the primary consumer. Okay, nice. All right, so here we have our secondary consumers, and now we're finished with that trophic level, and we're moving on to the fourth trophic level, which is the tertiary consumer. For the tertiary consumer in the aquatic food web and the terrestrial food web, what can we write respectively? So for the aquatic food web and the terrestrial food web, what are the tertiary consumers? So water bird for the aquatic and the auk for the terrestrial. All right, nice. So water bird for aquatic and auk for terrestrial. Okay, and just like that, you have earned 6 marks from this question. Easy cheesy question to get 6 marks from. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So I'm going to zoom it in a bit now so that you guys can see the question. So moving on to the next question, identify 2 similarities between the aquatic and the terrestrial food webs. Identify 2 similarities between the aquatic and the terrestrial food webs. What are 2 similarities between the food webs, students? So you can find producers in both the aquatic and the terrestrial food web. Yes, that is all. That is also a similarity between the two. All right. So what we can say about the food webs? So what we definitely can see is that they both have the same levels of consumers, because if we can go back to the table, producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. So to wrap it all up, they both have the same level of consumers. And next thing that we can note is that they are both characterized by linkages. So they are both characterized by linkages, because remember, a food web is an interlink of different food chains coming together to form a food web. So one, they both have the same level of consumers or the same amount of consumers. Two, they are both characterized by linkages. And a next one that we can say is that producers are at the base for tertiary and aquatic food webs. So you might can look at it. So if it is that you're in an exam and you can't come up with any of what I just said, you might can look at it and pick up similarities between the two food webs. But one similarity that you definitely need to pick up is that they are both characterized by linkages, right? Because remember that a food web is an interlink of different food chains. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So it's a bit blurry. I hope that you guys can see it. So I'm trying to zoom it up to make it even better. All right. So the next question, describe how data may be collected to construct the terrestrial food web in figure 1. Make a list of the materials and apparatus required and state one precaution to be taken in collecting the data. So first thing first, this is like a mini lab, right? So what we need to know the materials and apparatus that we're going to carry outside in order to collect data from the different organisms or for the different organisms. So what kind of materials and apparatus do we need? What kind of materials and apparatus? Come on, I think most of us did an ecology lab. So in order to come up with the apparatus and materials that we need, what we need to do, a smart way to do this is that we can go back to the food web, look at the organisms that are present within the food web, and think about the different materials and apparatus that could be used in order to collect data from the different organisms. So a quadrat, yes, a quadrat definitely. A quadrat could be used for the plants. What else? Differently from a quadrat, what else could we use? Remember, for the terrestrial food web, we have caterpillar, we have grasshopper, iguana, flycatcher, and all of that. What could we use? Could we use the quadrat to catch these organisms? Is the quadrat an appropriate sampling tool to be used to catch a bird? mark and release recapture method. If it is that we're going to carry out the mark and release recapture method, what kind of materials would we need to carry out that type of method? So we need food. Okay, food to lure them. All right, nice. We need net. Yes, Karima. We need pencil and paper. Yes. So we need net in order to catch the grasshoppers. So we need nets in order to catch the grasshoppers. All right. What else do we need? Yeah, man, we need a net for the grasshoppers. Remember the grasshoppers, them bunks all about. We can use a net, or we can use a jar or a bottle. We can use a pitfall trap, cage. Okay. So in order to do the mark release recapture, remember that the mark release recapture method or the Lincoln index method is where you need to go out in the field, catch the organism. You're going to place a tag, or you can use a permanent marker in order to mark the organism so that when you revisit the area, you'll be able to point out the organism. So whenever persons are doing the Lincoln index or the mark release recapture method, it is ideal that you use a very bright color, like a very shocking green or pink, or something that you could pick up from afar. So if it is that the organisms is far out from you and you can't see close by, the reflector on the organism will showcase itself to you. So you're going to also need scissors. It depends. But once we are carried out, we're going to need different types of materials depending on the organisms that are present throughout the food web. All right, so we get the materials and now we're going to get the method. So we need a method, right? So how would you go about putters? We could use putters, but what would we use the putters for? Let me go back. What would we use the putters for? For the caterpillar? Because remember that they mostly use putters like for ants and those things. Would we use it for the caterpillar? Binoculars. Yeah, man, that is also a nice one that we could use. All right, so now we need a method, right? So you need to write up your method in order to state how you went about collecting the organisms present in the food web. So first thing first, if we're going to look at the plants, remember you guys suggested earlier that we could use the quadrat in order to collect the data for the plants. So if it is that we're looking at the plants, how do we use a quadrat in order to collect data on plants? How do we use the quadrat? Putters are sampling tools that are used to catch small insects. It's made out of a jar and a tube that is used to carry out suction in order to get the organism inside of the jar. So a putter is mostly used for invertebrates, small moving insects. So how do we use the quadrat in order to get data for plants? Throw it randomly. Very good. So whenever you're using a quadrat, you don't want to be biased, right? Because you don't want to pick an area and say, oh, that area look nice and it have a lot of plants. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be biased. So what you're supposed to do is that you're supposed to throw the quadrat randomly, and if the quadrat lands, then you're going to go to the quadrat and count the amount of organisms that can be found throughout the different squares of the quadrant. So that's the first step that we're going to take. So we're going to throw the quadrant randomly in order to count the amount of plants that are present within the area. First step. If we are using the quadrant, we would place it at various places and record the organism. So we're going to use it randomly. Yes, Karima. All right. What else? Miss, please repeat the method. So the first step in the method is that we're going to throw the quadrant randomly. And by tossing the quadrant randomly, we are going to count the amount of organisms that are present within each square of the quadrant. Remember, whenever we are using quadrant, we don't count what is outside of the quadrant. We only count the organisms that are inside of the quadrant. So that's the first step. All right, the second step, right? Because remember, this goes for the organisms in the terrestrial food web. So since we finish with the plants, and now we need to move over to the caterpillar, the grasshopper, and the iguana. So are we going to collect data for the grasshopper and the caterpillar? Yes, Karima. So for the grasshopper, we are going to use the net in order to collect data for the grasshoppers, right? And for the caterpillar, I don't think caterpillars move really fast. Do you think, because remember that a quadrant can be used to measure or count organisms that are slow moving or immobile? So do you think we could have used the quadrant in order to count the amount of organisms in that area, the caterpillars? I think we could use the quadrant to count the caterpillars. Them not move that fast. We could toss a quadrant and count the amount of caterpillars that are present. And then when it comes on to the organisms that are really mobile now, we are going to use the Lincoln index or the mark release recapture method. So remember earlier, you need to use brightly colored markers if it is that you're going to use a marker, or you can get tags to put around the organisms. And then what you will do is you will revisit the area maybe after 3 days, 4 days, depending on you. So you will revisit the area and then you're going to tabulate your information. So that is how we would go about carrying out the method in order to collect data from all the organisms present within the terrestrial food web. Is that clear to everyone? We're good to go? Are we good to go? Ready for the precaution now? Okay, awesome. So we are ready for the precaution. So in carrying out a lab like this, what kind of precaution do you think is definitely necessary for this type of lab? So we're at the precaution. So you should give a precaution for this type of lab. What kind of precaution can you put in place for a lab like this? So remember that precautions are things that are put in place to prevent any form of damage or any form of miscalculations or contamination. So what kind of precaution could we come up with for an ecology lab? So it was ensured that none of the animals were harmed. Yes. Yes, Shania, that's a good one. Stay at a reasonable distance away from the organism. All right, because we don't want to kill any of the organism. Keep insects away from the face. Ensure that you do not harm any of the organisms while experimenting. All right, so what about yourself? Mr. So not protect the organisms them. Oh, not go protect on yourself. Only the law to keep insects away from face. What about sounding a business about in yourself? Yes, Delana, use gloves for poisonous insect. Get safety gear like gloves. So PPE, personal protective equipment. So we need our gloves, we need our lab coats, we need our goggles. We don't know what we're going out there for. So we need to protect ourselves also from the organisms. So we need to protect ourselves. So we need to wear PPE. And PPE goes for gloves, goggles, mask, lab coats, and all of that. So yes, students. So we all have our nice little precautions. Yes, Rihanna, PPE. So all the goggles, the lab coats, the mask, all of that comes under PPE. All right, so now we're going to move on. And next precaution, we could use, somebody said it was ensured that the right garments were worn, all right? We could also ensure that we use brightly colored tags on the organisms, because remember that whenever we revisit the area, we want to see the organisms, even though you might not see all of them. But if it is that you did not use a brightly colored tag for the organisms, and then when you go to the area, you'll not be able to see the organism. You can't use black as a tag in the Lincoln Index. All right. Don't squeeze fragile animal as it could kill them. Okay, nice. So we have a whole lot of precautions. All right, so this question here wants for us to construct a table to present the data to be collected for constructing the terrestrial food web. I think all of us knows how to construct a table. First thing first, when you're doing a table, even if your information is not correct, you should ensure that your title is descriptive enough, right? So you need a descriptive title. In a table like this, you're going to need different columns. So you're going to need a column for your species, and you're going to need a column for the total amount of species that you collected or that you have seen outside on your little field trip. So I think all of us can come up with a nice little table in an event like that. All right, so we don't want the table to take up our time, so we're going to move on to the next question. Suggest 2 ways in which the data to be collected may be summarized or represented apart from food webs. So how else could we represent this information, not information, sorry. How else could we represent this data differently from using a food web? So Karima is giving us different columns, the name of organisms, how much times the quadrat was thrown, total number of organisms. All right. So students, what can we use to represent data? Pie chart or bar graph. Very good. So a different way in which we could represent the data, we could use a pie chart or we could use a bar graph. or we could use a line graph, we could use histogram, we could use scatter plot, because they like to use scatter plot graphs in ecology or in biology. So is that clear to everyone? So suggest two ways in which the data to be collected may be summarized or presented. So we can use different types of charts, bar charts, or we can use pie charts, we can use line graphs, scatter plots, and all of that. I'll get 2 marks to that. Easy question. Tables, yes, Delana. Very good. We could also use tables to represent the information as well. So Anika says she would rather to go with a bar graph. Yes. Or you can do something like Delana. You could use a table to represent the information. Can we use frequency curve? Yes, you can if you want to. That could also be an answer for this question. All right. A pyramid. But remember, we have more than one organism. So how would we use a pyramid to represent all those organisms? I don't think the pyramid would be ideal enough to be used. Maybe the pyramid could be used to represent like a food chain. But in the order of a food web, since a food web is an interlink of many different food chains, it would be better for us to use charts to represent large amounts of data. Yes. All right. Next question. Explain why the method would be different for collecting data for the aquatic food web. Explain why the method would be different for collecting data for the aquatic food web. So when we say aquatic, we're dealing with water, right? And compared to terrestrial, how would the method be different? What would be different in this type of method? So Anika, you would use a net in the water, or you do that now? You'd remember that you have different types of net. So the net that in which we were speaking about earlier is like, I don't know if you guys watch SpongeBob. So in SpongeBob, you have those types of net that they use to collect like butterflies and all of that. But if you're talking about a net that can be used to catch like fish and all of that, so aquatic food web would require different materials and apparatus. Yes, definitely, Karima. Yeah, man, Anika, quadrat is used in aquatic environments. Most definitely. So like for seagrass beds, so I can remember when I went on a trip to Discovery Bay at the UA lab in Discovery Bay, the UA Marine Lab. I myself, I could not believe that they used a quadrat. So a quadrat can be used in the water for the seagrass bed. So yeah, man, you can use a quadrat. Because the ecosystem is different. One is water, so you need materials that water doesn't affect. All right. So in this sense, what can also be used, because you know, if you're in the water, you need to collect your information just the same. So you have some type of paper that are provided by NASA. They are waterproof papers that can be used in the water to scribble your information. So you get like waterproof papers and waterproof pencils to use in the water to scribble your information. Remember, we're going out in water. We're also going to need different types of PPE. So what are the different types of PPE that we're going to need in order to navigate the water? What kind of PPE do we need for the water? So remember I said earlier, the quadrat is definitely used in aquatic ecosystems to count or to collect data for seagrass beds. All right. So we need what up? So wait, don't just go out into the water like that. What is PPE? Personal protective equipment. We need water boots. No man, Delano. I know them look how shallow water that we are going now. We're going to do a little snorkeling, man. We're gonna do some little chuck off and them thing there. So yeah, we're gonna need goggles to protect our eyes. Gas tank. Gas tank and swimwear. The gas tank would mostly be for the person who is going to do the diving, because remember, and all we can dive, so we're going to have one perfect person who will be able to dive, and that person that is going to dive, that person do most of the work, because they're gonna dive, carry the quadrat, put the quadrat down there, and do a rough estimation of the amount of algae, seaweed that they found down there. So yeah, so the diver gonna do most of the work. All right, nice. Okay, moving on to the next question now. Decomposers are important food webs because they recycle nutrients. Name 2 types of decomposers that are usually found in food webs. So give me 2 types of decomposers. So bacteria and fungi. So bacteria and fungi are 2 types of decomposers. Maggots are mostly even though detritivores and decomposers, they're basically of similar identity. Maggots are most of the time considered to be detritivores along with earthworms as well. But some books still tell us the earthworms are decomposers, and some will tell you that they are detritivores. But to be on the safe side, always remember that bacteria and fungi are the main types of decomposers. Is that clear to everyone? To stay on the safe side, always refer to bacteria and fungi for the different types of decomposers. All right, moving on to the next question. Describe the role decomposers play in the recycling process. Describe the role decomposers play in the recycling process. All right, so decomposers play a vital role in the recycling process within ecosystems by breaking down organic matter and returning essential nutrients to the environment. Very good. The role of decomposers, they eat the decayed plants and animals and add back that nutrient into the soil or environment. Very good. Decomposers break down dead and decayed matter, and then despite it back out, I don't know if that's the word should be used here. But anyways, this is taken in by plant roots for respiration. All right, so nice. So I see a lot of nice comments. So decomposers, they are important because without decomposers, you know that the necessary macromolecules would still remain in the dead organisms. So you need decomposers to release the macromolecules such as carbon and hydrogen from dead organisms, right? And by releasing these type of macromolecules, they are recycled into the environment so that we can use all these macromolecules all over again for respiration. And for plants, you know that whenever decomposers secrete enzymes to break down the dead organisms, they create what is known as humus in the soil. So humus is a rich component with a lot of nutrients that helps with the growth of plants within the environment. So decomposers are really, really important. What about yeast as a decomposer? Yes, yeast can be considered as a decomposer as well, but the primary decomposers are definitely bacteria and fungi. Molds, where do you find mold? Which kingdom do you find mold, Anika? Which kingdom? And which kingdom do you find yeast? Anika, tell me. Which kingdom do you find mold? So yeast, mold, they are under the kingdom fungi. So you have three types of organisms that you can find in the kingdom fungi. So you can find mushrooms or tadpoles, you can find molds, and you can find yeast. So yeah, they're all decomposers. So is that clear to everyone? All right, so now we're moving on to the next question. All right, nice. So we're still on the classification and all of that. So we're looking at the next question, right? Some organisms found in or on the soil. So look at the different organisms that we have here. Look at the similarities between all of the organisms. So the first question, identify two features of the organisms observed in figure 3, which could be used to classify them. So identify two features of the organisms observed in figure 3, which could be used to classify them. So let's go back to the picture with the organisms, right? So what two features could we use in order to classify these organisms in one group? So we could use the number of legs, very good, and segments. Awesome, awesome. So that's what I'm looking for. So we could use the body segments and the number of legs in order to classify the organisms. All right, 2 easy points, man. Okay, name one group of soil organisms that is important in the recycling of soil nutrients. So name one group of soil organisms that is important in the recycling of soil nutrients. So which organism in the soil helps with the recycling of soil nutrients? Or any organism at all? Give me an example of one that helps with the recycling. Worms. What kind of worm? Worm is a broad word, you know. What kind of worm? Is it a flatworm? What kind of worm is it? So decomposers. And if you want to put worm, you can put like earthworm. So decomposers help with the recycling of soil nutrients. Yeah, man, earthworms, decomposers. Yeah. So earthworms, decomposers, any of that can help with the recycling of nutrients within the soil. All right, moving on to the next question. Organisms 1 and 3 in figure 3 are usually found under stones or leaf litter. Suggest 2 reasons why these organisms are found in this type of habitat. They all have body segments, they all have a protective shell. No, they don't all have a protective shell. No, man, they don't all have a protective shell. If you're talking about, I know what you're talking about in a Kishana. You're talking about exoskeleton. That's what you're talking about. So you can just make a note of it from now, Kishana. So you're talking about the exoskeleton. And yes, if it is you're referring to the exoskeleton, that is indeed correct. Nice, Karima. Karima, you just spit out all of the answer them one time, man. So to prevent desiccation, and desiccation is the process of drying out. So, you know, they want to retain the moisture that is within their body, and they also want to hide away from their predators. It's their habitat. Yes, that is also correct. So shelter, protection, and to prevent desiccation. It helps organisms to safely lay eggs. All right, nice. Okay, to investigate the number in the population of organism 5 that occurs in its habitat, list the apparatus you would need. So in order to investigate the amount of organism 5, so this is organism 5 right here, what kind of apparatus would we need to collect data for organism 5? Anybody can tell me what is organism 5? What is organism 5? Millipede, very good. So organism 5 is a millipede. Anika is a caterpillar. No, Anika, it's not a caterpillar, it's a millipede. Worm. Oh God, remember I'm telling you, worm is a broad word. It's a millipede. So organism 5 is a millipede. What could we use to catch a millipede? So we could use quadrat. Them thing here move fast, you know. Them thing here move really fast. So you feel like if we throw down one quadrat, by the time we throw down already, if we go count them, they run gone, man. Oh, they scare you. They scare all of us. But you know that the millipedes are harmless. They are harmless. You know which one is dangerous? The centipede. Millipede, them harmless, man. Them not there enough. Maybe them give you a little tap, but a pitfall trap. So yes, a pitfall trap could be used. You could also use jars, bottles, and all of that in order to get the millipede. And if it is that you're going in an area where you have leaf litter, remember, leaf litter always, okay, don't know what is under the leaf litter. So maybe you're going to need a piece of stick or a shovel to, like to move away the leaves so that you can see the organisms moving about. We couldn't use a net. No, we can't use a net. We could use a pitfall trap. We could use jars. We could use bottles. We need a piece of stick, a Tulgren funnel. Yes, most definitely. We can use that one as well. All right. So we get what we need. So now, describe the method you would use. So what kind of method would you use in order to count the amount of millipedes that are present within an area? So as I said earlier, we could get a piece of stick. And when we get the piece of stick, what we can do is we can go in the area and we can move away the leaves using the piece of stick. Once we move away the leaves using the piece of stick, then we can start collecting the millipedes by using a jar to collect them in the jar, count them. After we count them, we can release them. So that's how it works. All right, moving on to the next question. Organism 5 feeds on leaf litter, while organism 6 is thought to be a carnivore. Define the term carnivore. What is a carnivore? Remember, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. These organisms, they are herbivores. So millipedes are mostly herbivores. So you can't catch them with piece of meat. You'd have to do that with the centipede. So define the term carnivore. What is a carnivore? The term carnivore refers to an animal that primarily feeds on the flesh of other animals. All right, nice. All right, so next question, give 2 adaptations that organism 6 should possess as a carnivore. So in order for organism 6 to catch its prey as a carnivore, what are 2 adaptations that it needs? So let's go back to the picture. Let's look at organism 6. So this is organism 6. What kind of adaptations do organism 6 need? So a carnivore is an organism that feeds on other animals, or an organism that feeds on only animals. Sharp teeth, sharp claws, speed and camouflage. Yeah, because these organisms are really fast. The same one we want to call 40 leg, them really fast. Toxins, very good. So they have venomous glands. So they have venomous glands to paralyze their prey. They have a streamlined body. And once they have a streamlined body, that will enhance their movement, because anything streamlined move really fast, right? Once it's even in its elements. So if it is that you go to where the organism's habitat in its element, then it's going to show some form of dominance. All right, we are going good, man. We are going good. Seems like we like classification. Okay, now we're moving over to the nitrogen cycle. All right, so let's look at the nitrogen cycle. So the question, name the process carried out by the bacteria at each of the stages indicated by P, Q, R, and S. So what kind of process is taking place at P? What kind of process is taking place at P? Are we ready, students? We're looking at the nitrogen cycle now. What kind of process is taking place at P? We're looking at the nitrogen cycle. If it is that nitrogen is coming from the atmosphere and it enters the soil, what kind of process is taking place there? No, it's not precipitation. Respiration? No, it's not respiration. We don't remember the nitrogen cycle, nitrogen fixation. So at P, we have nitrogen fixation. So remember, nitrogen in its gaseous state, it's of no use to us or any other organism. So it needs to be converted to nitrates before it's useful. So nitrogen in its gaseous state, it's useless to us. It needs to be converted to nitrates before it is considered to be useful, or ammonia. So nitrogen fixation at P. What about Q? Where we have nitrate going back to the environment. What would Q be? What is Q? Anybody can tell me what is Q? So we're finished with P. P is definitely nitrogen fixation. What would Q be? So remember, nitrate is returning to the atmosphere in the form of nitrogen gas. Denitrification. So Q would be denitrification. Yes. So P, nitrogen fixation, Q, denitrification, and denitrification is the return of nitrates from the soil in the form of nitrogen gas back to the environment. What about R? What would R be? And S? So by looking at the diagram here, protein in plants and animals, right? So what would R be? How about S? Assimilation. And S is coming from death and decay. What would S be? Decay or ammonification. Very good. So S would be ammonification slash decay. All right, so P, nitrogen fixation, Q, denitrification, S, as you can see, death and decay. So this is ammonification or, what you call it again? Decay, ammonification or decay or decomposition. Some persons might have decomposition, but if you're going to put decomposition, don't leave off ammonification. And then for this part, excretion and egestion. Oh, this would not be R. This would be nitrification. So R would not be assimilation because remember that excretion And egestion is where waste is being released into the soil, right? And through nitrification, this ammonia will be converted to nitrites and then nitrates. So make we go one more time. It's a combination of different papers, Anika. So from 05 to 08. So P, nitrogen fixation, Q, denitrification, S is definitely ammonification or decay, and protein in plants and animals. Look at the box right here. It states excretion and egestion. So from the waste, you get the ammonia coming from the organism, and it will be converted to nitrites, then nitrates, and R would be nitrification. Is that clear to everyone? So we have to pay attention to right here. So the word in the box right here, excretion and egestion. All right, moving right along. Explain how nitrates from the soil become protein in plants and animals. Explain how nitrates from the soil become protein in plants and animals. So explain how nitrates from the soil become protein in plants and animals. So first thing first, when answering this question, we need to also talk about nitrogen fixation, right? Which allows for which allows for nitrogen gas to be converted as nitrates in the soil. So we need to talk about that part. So when it is converted to nitrates in the soil, the plants later absorb the nitrate by assimilation to be used up in the plants as protein. Or we could also talk about nitrification. Through nitrification, remember that waste coming from the organisms also contain nitrogen. This nitrogen in the form of ammonia needs to be converted to nitrites, then nitrates, in which the plants and other organisms absorb through the form of assimilation to be used up by the body. So two ways. So we can look at it in two ways. So one, by nitrogen fixation, the nitrogen gas is converted in the soil as nitrates, or we can look at it nitrification, in which the waste coming from the organisms provides ammonia in the soil, and then that ammonia is converted to nitrites, then nitrates, to be absorbed by the plants and other organisms. So I hope that is clear to all of us. All right, moving right along. Leguminous plants. Leguminous plants have bacteria in their root nodules, which are involved in the nitrogen cycle. The relationship between the legumes and the bacteria is described as a mutualistic relationship. Explain why this description is appropriate. So the relationship between the relationship between the bacteria and the root nodules of leguminous plants is considered to be of a mutualistic relationship. Can anybody explain why this description is appropriate? Why is this description appropriate? So one, Delano, it's converted to protein by nitrogen fixation. Remember that nitrogen gas is converted to nitrates within the soil. So within the soil, you have large amounts of nitrogen gas being fixed to nitrates. So that is one way. The next is by nitrification. And this is where organisms, the waste coming from organisms, or the decay of organisms, they might provide some form of ammonia in the soil, right? It needs to be converted to nitrites, then nitrates to be absorbed by the organisms through assimilation. So explain why this description is appropriate. What can we say about the description? What can we say? So in this sense, what the question is simple one for you guys. Oh, let me see what Anika wrote. Legumes need nitrogen to grow while it releases nutrients and energy for the bacteria. These organisms have a mutualistic relationship because they both benefit from each other. Very good, very good. So remember, students, right? The leguminous plants, they provide food, which is in the form of sugar or in the form of starch to the bacteria, right? They also provide shelter. They provide a habitat for the bacteria as well. And in the sense, the legumes, nitrogen is directly fixed in the root nodules to provide the plant with protein. So that is one of the reasons why they always say that legumes is a go-to meal. So if it is that you did not eat a healthy breakfast in the morning, you can simply get a pack of peanuts to help with to give you energy, right? A pack of peanuts is loaded with a lot of energy because you get protein, you get sugar, and you get fats. Am I clear, students? Isn't it like a shark and a remora fish? A shark and a remora fish can be of two relationships. A shark and a remora fish can share a common but the question they down here, so make feel like me give you the answer. All right. So next part, apart from mutualism, identify two other types of relationships that occur among living organisms. Give one example of each relationship you identify. So give me the next two types of relationship and give examples for each. So if we say commensalism, give me an example of a relationship with commensalism. So parasitic or parasitism, parasite and worm. I know the exact example that you're talking about, Anika. But suppose see you just go put parasite, suppose you don't know the name of the parasite. You still go put it. So parasitism, tapeworms and humans intestine, shark and remora fish, cow and egret. Yes, that is also a very common example. A next common example for parasitism, we could use a dog and ticks to stay on the safe side. All right. That's okay, Anika. Moving on to the next question. So in many Caribbean countries, wetland ecosystems, swamps are classified as nature reserves and are protected by special laws that restrict human activities in these areas. State 4 reasons why wetlands are considered to be of great importance. So why are wetlands important? Why are wetlands important? Let me try zoom in the question a little bit. So they provide habitats for organisms, all right? So we need 4 reasons. Extinct species habitat. I don't understand that one, Delana. Do you mean endangered species? So they are filled with endangered species and vulnerable species. Protect marine resources such as coral reefs and seagrass beds from being smothered by silt brought down by rivers and streams. All right. Remember, in a wetland, like for example, in mangroves, right? You have a lot of, they are considered to be breeding ground for a wide variety of organisms. Remember that mangroves, they are very diverse in terms of the different types of organisms that can be found throughout those areas. So the breeding ground for it's important for breeding ground because like we call them fish again, salmon. You know, like salmon oftentimes they return to the river to lay eggs and then they move back over to salt water. So you have a lot of different organisms that go to wetlands in order to lay eggs or anything like that. And next thing, it helps to break waves and strong currents coming in. So the wetlands, such as mangroves, they help to break waves coming in. They provide for a nursery for yes. So it's a nursery. Yeah, man, that is indeed true. And next thing, it controls or helps prevent soil erosion. So wetlands also helps to control soil erosion. They are filled with endangered species. Yeah, they are habitats for organisms, their ecosystems, and are used for recreational flood. Yes, I made mention of all of those already. So 1, breeding ground for a wide variety of organisms. 2, helps to break waves and strong currents. 3, controls or helps to prevent soil erosion. 4, provides a habitat for most endangered and threatened organisms. Opportunities for recreations, all right? Okay, now we're going to look at the next question. Suggest 4 ways in which human activity could affect a wetland ecosystem. Suggest 4 ways in which human activity could affect a wetland ecosystem. Come on, just run them up in the chat. So let's get the chat blazing. So what are 4 ways in which human activity could affect a wetland ecosystem? Oh, can it destroy it? Shania, what kind of activity would destroy it? So this is your answer is very broad. It needs to be more specific. Pollution of wetland. So yes, that is definitely one. Converting them to agriculture, diverting their water to other locations for irrigation, stalling dams to generate hydroelectrical power using their water to cool of power plants. All right, all of this makes sense, but that what needs to happen is that it's jumbled up, Anika. So, all right, so for the persons who are not really thinking that far out, yes, oil spills, industrialization, right? Through deforestation, because remember, deforestation, they're going to remove the trees within the wetland, or they're going to remove the mangroves, right? In order to get lumber. They can also remove the mangroves to build up an area. Like, for example, I like to use Portmore. So for most of us who are familiarized with Portmore, it is considered to be a dumping site, right? Because in order to build up more apartment complexes, they dumped up most of the area in Portmore. So that is also industrialization. So pollution with human waste and animal waste. So like sewage, because you know that some persons, they are some companies filter their sewage in the mangroves, right? And this can definitely destroy the mangroves. All right. Moving on to the next question. The negative effects of human activity can also be observed in urban areas. For example, although no dumping signs are placed at strategic locations throughout most cities, indiscriminate garbage disposal is still a universal problem. Suggest 4 reasons why indiscriminate garbage disposal should be discouraged. So why should indiscriminate garbage disposal be discouraged? What kind of effect does this type of disposal poses on the different communities, or poses on the environment? If it increasing mosquitoes, Shania, what can happen? Shania, me feel like you give me the answer then piece by piece, you know. What can happen if it increases the amount of mosquitoes within an area? What can that lead to? So it can attract rodents and roaches, which could lead to community outbreak of diseases. Very good. So Shania, that's what I'm looking for. If you're going to say it will increase the number of mosquitoes within an area, if it's going to increase the number of mosquitoes, it's going to increase the amount of diseases as well, such as malaria, dengue fever, and all of that. So yeah. And next thing that can happen is that organisms can consume non-biodegradable materials that may cause harm to the organism. Remember that non-biodegradable materials are materials that takes a long while, or it's a never ending. Because if you look at scandal bags, right? Scandal bags, they don't break down. So those are non-biodegradable materials. They don't break down, or they take a long while before they break down. A next point is that what can happen is that it can block drains that can cause flooding. So remember, whenever we have a flood, you see a lot of plastic bottles in the drains, and due to that, the water is not able to move throughout the drains freely. And what can happen from this is that it can lead to flooding within an area. A next thing that can happen as well is that toxic materials can emit harmful chemicals into the environment, which can lead to air pollution or even respiratory illnesses, because you know that some persons, you might have certain garbages, because anything that is not of use can be considered to be a garbage, right? So if it is that you toss certain toxic chemicals outside or wherever you might have thrown it, it can be very harmful to others, because it can form some form of respiratory illness, or it can affect the environment in such a way that it will contribute to global warming. All right, moving on to the next question. Environmentalists argue against the use of inorganic fertilizers, while farmers argue in favor of it. Present an argument in support of the environmentalists, giving 3 clear points. So you're up on a debate as an environmentalist against farmers. Farmers want to use inorganic fertilizer, but as the environmentalist, you want to tell them why it's not effective to use these type of chemicals. So what are the 3 points that you would put across? Which 3 points would you put across to support the environmentalists? Come on, students, what are inorganic fertilizers? So persons might be allergic to chemicals. Using chemicals can damage the soil, cause less crops to be produced. Very good. So inorganic fertilizers can definitely reduce the soil quality. So that is a clear point that you can put across. It is causing cardiovascular disease problems to senior citizens. Also, Anika, maybe you'd have to expound more. But me get what you say, but I still want to see what else you would write. So it can also cause eutrophication during heavy rainfalls. So we know that eutrophication is rapid algal blooming, and this can definitely affect the organisms that are within the water. If it is that it is reducing the quality of the soil, this can also lead to soil erosion. All right. So moving on to the next question, because we should wrap it up anytime now. But let's just look at one more question. Let's look at one more question. All right. So now we're looking at cells. Identify the structures labeled A to D. So what are the structures labeled A to D? We can all type it in the chat. So what would A be? What would B, C, and D also represent? So due to harmful chemicals, it could prevent new growth for plants. So what would A be? All right. So that is correct, Delano. We are now looking at the cell. D, nucleus. No, D is not the nucleus. C for cell wall. Yes, that is correct, Anika. B for cytoplasm, yes, that is also correct. D for nucleus, no, we're gonna keep on as a D for nucleus. It's a plant cell. We're gonna find D as nucleus. Come on, students. What would D be? A for mitochondria, no, it's not the mitochondria. Vacuole, very good. So D for vacuole. What is A? So D, vacuole, C, cell wall, B, cytoplasm. What would A be? We can tell me what is A. What is A, students? A would be the chloroplast. State the function of the structures A and D. So what's the function of the vacuole and what's the function of the chloroplast? What's the function of the chloroplast and the vacuole? So site of photosynthesis for A, yes, that is correct. And for D, the vacuole. So the vacuole aids in storage and transport. All right, moving on to the last question. State 2 ways in which a cell shown in figure 4 is different from a human white blood cell. So state 2 ways in which the cell shown in figure 4 is different from a white blood cell. So no cell wall, the vacuole is smaller. That is indeed correct. So in animal cell, the vacuole is smaller. It's temporary and you have more than one. When compared to plant cell, the vacuole is large, it's permanent, and you only can find one vacuole. So no cell wall, no chloroplast. In terms of using the vacuole in animal cell, it's smaller, it's temporary, and you can find more than one. All right, students. So this is where we are going to end for today. And if it is that we want to do more marathons, we can sign up with HTS and become a member of HTS so that we can have more marathons, right? So bye everyone. Take care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of your holiday if it is that you are on holiday.